Many different things influence the way a school feels, from the layout, floor plan, programming, but all of that can look bleak and empty without the furniture and interior design. Collaboration between the architects, interior designers, and educational planners help create an atmosphere that makes an empty building feel like a school. Welcome back to What's the Scope with Finegold Alexander Architects, the podcast where we share our hands on approach to projects and how we love to celebrate design that is boundless. I'm Madison Mercado, and in this last episode of our Back to School series, we'll take you through the considerations and processes that influence the furniture and finishings in a school.
I'm Regan Shields Ives. I'm a principal of Finegold Alexander, and I lead our K-12 studio sector design. And I really love working with schools because it unites my passion for architecture and education, and it's just a lot of fun.
I'm Connor Byrne, project architect at Finegold Alexander Architects. I'm the one that goes down to the site every week to observe construction and work on all of that process with the Gilbane construction team. I've worked on school projects for most of my career, and there's no one better than students in terms of clients. It's always amazing to see their smiling faces after the building is done.
Hi, I'm Amanda Baillie. I'm an interior designer at Stefura Associates. I've been working on school projects for probably about 3.5 years now. And one thing I love about working with schools is how much color is involved. I love a pop of color here and there, and schools are the best place to have it everywhere.
Just gonna get right into things. So all three of you are working on this Gladstone Elementary School project right now. Regan, could you first tell me a little bit about what this project is?
So Gladstone Elementary School is located in Cranston, Rhode Island. It is a K through 5 elementary school. And it is the third of 3 projects that the city of Cranston has undertaken in the past 5 or so years. And what's really interesting about Gladstone is that the city is really reimagining how education is rolled out to their students. And we're following this concept of creating learning commons, learning studios, and learning communities where learning really happens more so outside of the traditional classroom. We have learning studios, which are sort of the comparable equivalent to classrooms, but most of the learning happens in the learning commons, where students come together, they work either independently or in smaller groups or with teachers, kind of doing all that work in that space. And then if they need smaller or more focused instruction, they'll go into the learning studios. And in between the learning communities, the way that the building is designed, we have these centrally located curiosity centers where a lot of the mixed program spaces are, like the maker space, the music room, the art room, and then a library that's not really your traditional library. It's spread across 2 floors where it's really more of like an open space. And we have a lot of nooks where students can, work together or they can work independently within these spaces. So it's really using every inch of the building as a learning opportunity, which is really fun. There's, I think, 1 dedicated corridor in the whole school, and that's just, by nature of needing to get from this one section to a stair. But for the most part, everything is sort of open and you go from one space to the next. So it's been a really exciting process to work through from a design standpoint. And I think, as Connor noted, because he's down there on a weekly basis, to really see this come together, it looks and feels very different than a traditional school. And I know Amanda will have a lot to share about the colors and the interior design that we're really making our mark on this project.
Yeah, just to touch a little bit on the design, that program, as was described, really did lead how the design of the school came about. You have the learning communities on either side. There's 2 per floor, so those 2 wings are kind of your more simple box shape with like the windows that look out, and then those central flexible curiosity center spaces. The architecture really follows that, where the building has cantilevers, it has kind of like a cascading look of different volumes that kind of are off angle. So it's a really unique looking building in addition to a unique program.
What role do you all see furniture play in shaping the educational environment in the schools?
Well, I think furniture really shapes the environment and gives students a choice to define their own environment. For instance, in Gladstone, it's not all desks and chairs. You can create any sort of setup that you'd like with different lounge furniture, with different tables, different seating options. So I think it just allows them to define their own environment. And I think furniture can be fun in many ways, and I think it's important to have those fun elements, like wobble stools and lounge furniture. I just think it's important to have something different nowadays than your desk and your chair.
And the Gladstone project, as I said at the beginning, is the third of 3 projects that the city has undertaken with this different learning model. And the original project was Eden Park, which they viewed as a Pathfinder project. And it was an experiment, but a very thoughtful experiment where they had taken these concepts that are very successful elsewhere in the country, elsewhere in the world, and did a small wing of the Eden Park School. So we were able to learn a lot from what they had done previously. And I think it's pretty obvious when you look back and think about it, but I don't know why, it's not as common in other schools. But you think about how students interact over the course of the day. You think about their energy. You think about how they need to move and wobble. And that can't always, you can't always be outside for recess. So students need to be inside learning. But the furniture is something that doesn't have to fight the student. Sitting in a hard plastic chair is a very different experience than sitting on a wobble stool where you just are moving. And it actually helps students pay attention more because they're able to move their bodies and free up that, restraint so that they're listening now to what the teachers are saying. And kids I think even adults like to be comfortable when they're learning or doing something. So furniture has very much been a part of the entire design process for this project. It's not something that we just came to Amanda at the end of the design and was like, can you just throw some furniture in here? We've had conversations all along. So another sort of element that makes Gladstone very different than some of the other projects that we've been involved with.
Yeah, kind of an anecdote is, well, not really an anecdote, but like a story that that I've always remembered from in school was, everybody likes to just move their chair even just an inch. You sit down at a table, you kind of just nudge the chair, and that's all you need to feel comfortable. And that's why, when you, especially site design, having fixed furniture is not always the best. So that like simple gesture of giving somebody the freedom to kind of move or do something different, this project takes that to an extreme level where, they could have a beanbag chair as their seat instead of, like a plastic chair that's attached, fixed to a desk. So it's really interesting.
I think it's nice to have different furniture as well because different students learn in different ways, and not all students can sit at a desk in a chair all day long and focus the whole time. Sometimes they need that extra stimulation here and there just to keep themselves focused.
Are there certain contexts where a student or classroom would need something more fixed in place or something more traditional like those plastic chairs and it's still productive for them in their classroom?
I think it's important to have them as an option in every classroom because some students do like sit down at a table in front of the class in a chair that's not moving, and that's how they work best. But I don't necessarily think you have to have a whole classroom of your traditional furniture.
Right. And of course, like the art room is still going to have big tables with stools and things like that. You need to still have flat surfaces, of course, to do, drawings and art. Same with the maker space.
Yeah, and the furniture that we're using, when it's all installed, it's not going to look like a jungle gym, or it's the furniture manufacturers are also at the forefront of thinking about how to create their furniture that responds to students. So it's still conducive to learning. It's not like it's crazy town in these spaces. So there's been a lot of work that's been done to study the psychological impact on students and furniture, and which is great because we're constantly learning from our furniture vendors, manufacturers, and I think they're constantly researching and just trying to explore options that are not only durable, but that provide this flexibility but still this stability at the same time, because they do need to take tests. They do need to do other things, that require a little bit more structured focus.
Right.
I think a lot of things we're seeing nowadays is tables or desks that can be put into groups or taken out of groups. So you might have a table that makes a triangle, but that table splits up into 3 different tables. So now you have individual surfaces for students that they have to break up into group or break away from groups. But I think it's important that teachers are still keeping kids in groups. I think collaborative learning is still important. But yeah, as you get older, testing, you need to break apart, and you don't just want desks and chairs. I think that's a great option to have tables that kind of form like that.
Right. How early do the manufacturers and vendors come into the project so they know what you want and how to, I guess, make whatever you're asking for?
I mean, in this particular instance, as soon as schematic design, when we were talking about just concepts, we were talking and thinking about furniture. And we also encourage our clients to go to furniture fairs. And we brought one to Rhode Island so that they could go and actually kick the tires on a lot of the furniture. And in this instance, they were also able to go to some of the other schools that had been completed to really test drive what is working really well. They could get feedback from teachers in Garden or Eden Park and Garden City, which was another school that was the predecessor to Gladstone. So we were fortunate because there's a lot of resources right there that they can rely on and ask questions and see what's working really well and maybe things that they want to do a little bit differently. But it's definitely something that is part of the conversation early on, because when we were looking at the different options and the layouts of the building plan, we had to think about how is furniture going to work its way into these spaces.
And I think typically, too, for all schools, I mean, you'll see photos we'll show to staff at the beginning showing different types of furniture and what they think will look best and work best with their students. But towards the end of the process, before we start making orders, we do always try to have a sit test where we can bring in furniture for staff and students to try out, see what works best for them and for their school.
That kind of brings me into the next question of in that way, and what other ways do students and educators play a role in the design of Gladstone and other schools that you've worked on?
Well, in this particular instance, they played a significant role in the design, but also some of the furniture design. We hosted a Shark Tank event for the students where, working with our educational planner, they turned it over to the students to design their ideal space, creating furniture. And similar to the Shark Tank show, they brought their ideas. They made little models of these different options. One was a rainbow slide that had some shelving in it. Another was a fish tank that was actually a chair. I mean, they were really creative and had a lot of fun with it. And the city and the district is decided that they're going to have a mill worker create an actual piece of the furniture that the students helped design, which I think is just really amazing that they're putting their money where their mouth is to say that your ideas and your voice is important, and you're going to see that have an impact in the school. And you'll be able to, while you're in school, you can come and hopefully come back and visit and see the mark that you've made. So I think in that instance, it was really important to have them be a part of the process.
Yeah, the rainbow slide is currently in design by the millworker, and then the other furniture or millwork item that the students design that's going to be built is the bear den cubby. So it's basically, like a shape of a bear's head that is a little like alcove that students can sit in for some quiet time with a big cushion in it, which reminds me I've got some physical samples to review with you, Amanda. Yeah, and I don't know if we also want to touch on a lot of the wall graphics. There are large format wall graphics in the school that the students played a large role in designing. At the main entrance, there's a tree with like blowing in the wind, the leaves coming off, and each leaf is actually like a small drawing that one of the students has produced. And there are all sorts of languages writing out the words welcome, since it's a very diverse student population. I don't know if you want to describe any more of the graphics, but they all is to say that their actual artwork has been scanned and turned into wall graphics that will be on the walls in the new school.
Yeah.
I think it's also important in a school that we do have pops of color here and there, and we do incorporate these graphics, but we also leave a bit of blank space for them to add their own mark down the road as the teachers change, as the students change. I just think it's important that they have something a little more flexible to make their own mark.
And to that point, the entire sort of premise of the interior feel of the school was driven by a project that the fourth graders did prior to us starting the design project, where they were creating these trees that were really kind of a way to signify welcome. And that was the sort of the genesis of this idea to not only create the custom artwork that's on the wall when you walk in, but we decided to structure the design and the color palette based on this concept of a tree in a forest, where the first floor has more like earth tones, some oranges, some yellows. And then as you work your way up to the second floor, there's more greens. And you start to see some yellow, like signifying sunlight kind of sprinkling in. And then once you get to the third floor, the predominant color is blue. So it was really this journey from the forest floor through the tree canopy and then up to the sky. And while it's probably something that we could have sat around and come up with, it really has a much more impactful feel because this was driven by the students and the project that they did. And I'm just thinking back to the sort of template that they created, the tree. I mean, it was this crinkled piece of paper that was pinned on the wall, but from that, like, we took our inspiration, which just feels so much more custom and unique to the Gladstone students, their community, than just having some designers come and say what we think they should do. I mean, we really took the lead from them.
I really love the color yellow shines throughout all the floors. So you have that sunshine, that bit of light, no matter if you're on the forest floor or you're up in the sky, which I think is really nice.
You never would know what the school could look like had you not seen those original drawings and ideas from all of these kids. Amanda, you kind of touched on this a little bit about leaving blank space in the spaces around the school. What do you kind of imagine that people, or the students and the educators, are going to use to fill up those spaces as time goes on?
Well, I imagine there'll be more artwork from the students. I think that no matter where you are in an art classroom, in a makerspace, in a classroom, teachers and students want to show their work. They want to hang up what they've done throughout the year so it can be displayed. And I also think teachers love to use it as a learning tool, where they're adding posters to the walls. Maybe they're learning something new that semester, so they want to add something that has to do with that. So I think just leaving space to have them add what they want when they need to throughout the year is just important, and not have it be too overwhelming in the space, because when you have too much color and then they add all of their artwork and posters, it can be very overwhelming for students.
We do also have some areas of tack board, in some of the, I guess the one single corridor in the first floor that leads to the cafeteria has a long tack board, and then in the Curiosity Center on each of the floors there's an area of tack board. So there's places for the school to pin up announcements or just more art or anything really that they want.
Yeah, I mean, we do obviously bring an overarching design element to each project so that the whole thing hangs together, but we also just want to create a blank canvas for the students to make their own mark each year, and it can be sort of different every year, which is really fun. That this the school will kind of look different over the course of the years.
Yeah, that's true. As the students get older and they leave or new ones come in. I kind of want to close out with a question that's less about Gladstone, but I mean, you can still use it as an example. But just wondering about how the choices that you make in the interior design change at different grade levels. So, like elementary versus middle versus high school. Do you have less of these chairs or things that move around more, or more of them, depending on what grade it is, things like that?
So I think one big thing that I noticed and change when you're going from elementary to high school is actually the colors. Elementary school, you're seeing a lot more of those bright yellows, orange, greens. And then high school, you're seeing a little bit more of muted colors. So instead of using a bright red, you might see maroon or a royal blue. You'll see a navy. I think it just matures a little bit, and you want the older kids to feel a little bit more mature, like they have a little bit more respect. They're not like a kid anymore. So I think that's something that we see a lot. And we also see, so K through 2, typically all the students are in tables, whether that be circle tables, rectangular tables. And then as the students get older, it's really grades 3 and up is typically in other schools where you see the switch to all desks in a classroom. But what I like about Gladstone is they didn't just switch the desks. They kept the tables, but they kept options. So you have low tables, you have high tables, you have tables you can break up into individual desks if you want to, or you can use them as group work. So I think that's just a little bit different how Gladstone changed how the furniture changes throughout the grades.
And we've also found our firm does a lot of higher ed work as well. And so we'll look to our higher ed clients to see what kind of furniture, what kind of finishes are we doing at higher ed institutions, and take some of that back to our high school projects, because we're kind of creating these environments where they're going to be prepared to go on to higher ed. And I think a lot of high school students want to see themselves as more mature and moving into higher ed grades, and not to Amanda's point, really feel more like kids in school. And so we kind of take that and back it into each of our school projects. And even our higher ed clients, we look at how our office is being configured, because the whole intention of this course of education is preparing students for the next chapter of their lives. So in doing so, you kind of look to see, well, where are they heading? And you want to create some semblance of that environment that prepares them for the next step.
Thank you for listening to What's the Scope with Finegold Alexander Architects. This episode was produced and edited by Madison Mercado with music from the YouTube Music Library. Find us at faainc.com and connect with us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Finegold Alexander Architects to find out when the next series drops. See you next time.